Hi, welcome to Revenue Marketing Television, the CMO Insight Series. I'm your host, Jeff Pedowitz, President and CEO of the Pedowitz Group. Today, as our guest, we have Julie Roehm, who is Chief Experience Officer and Chief Marketing Officer for ABRA Auto Body Glass. Julie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jeff. Fun to be here at the beginning of football season. So
yes, it's
nice
coming
to be
up.
able to start a little football.
Absolutely. Yeah, our high school team is hosting a big tournament this weekend for the first time, and it's going to be on ESPN, which is like really exciting.
Wow!
Yeah, the Freedom Bowl. So yeah, so very exciting. So I love your title because just not just the CMO part, which is great, but the customer experience officer part. So tell me, what makes a great customer experience?
Well, I mean, a great customer experience, I think, first and foremost, is personal. So customer experience, just kind of everything we do, marketing, experience, these are big, general, generic words. And the point of, I think, all of it, marketing and experience included, actually, is to make it as personal as possible for every single consumer. I think, it doesn't need to be said, but in the digital age, people get that. They get what they want. They have their own Instagram pages and, Pinterest, and things are very bespoke for each and every person. And so they kind of tolerate us in business when we genericize the experience. So our quest is to constantly drill down and make every experience personal to that individual with what they need, how they need it, when they need it.
Do you think it's harder today to do that, to deliver personalized experiences?
I think it's harder because the expectations are higher. So I think there are more tools at hand that actually allow us to give a greater personal experience today than we would have 20 years ago, 15 years ago. But the expectations now are much higher than they were then. So I think if we'd had today's tools and expectations from 15 years ago, we'd be much more successful. But that's not how it works.
One of the things I love about you and your background is you're one of the fewer CMOs that have gone back and forth pretty effortlessly between B2C and B2B. Because I think before this, you were at SAP, right?
I was at SAP. So yeah, it's my career trajectory has been, to your point, it's been non-traditional is probably the best way to put it. So engineering from Purdue, which of course naturally led to the marketing degree at the University of Chicago. So for business school, no, actually I went to business school thinking I'd be finance, and just ended up with strategy and marketing. And I think, from there I went to Ford Motor Company, and I think the value, and this was in the mid 90s, yikes. But I think the value of,
I'm right there with you, so it's okay. It's all right.
Right. So when you see those 25 and 30-year reunion things, you're like, who are they talking about? But the value of the experience, I think, both from an engineering perspective and from even having marketing and strategy at a very quantitatively focused school like University of Chicago, is that my bent was always towards more of a quantitative turn for marketing. And so it was a good timing. Mid 90s towards the late 90s was, the internet was really became of age in like 1993. I think the first internet ad was in 1994. Ford Motor Company launched the Ford Focus in 1999. It was the first time we launched it in the States, and spent 10% of our ad budget on digital. And it was, it was super revolutionary then. So, moving from there, kind of always had a love for this kind of this digital, because of the experience, I think, because it was unique, but also because of the quantitative ability to be able to get more real-time feedback. I mean, it's nice to be able to build a great TV ad, and believe me, I've built many of those in my careers. And you see this career and you sit back and you watch it, the Super Bowl with friends, and you get feedback from the 8 people in the room. But you can wait for the USA Today thing the next day or whatever people are going to say. And it's still very subjective. And that's why I think, obviously digital has grown the way it has, is because you get that real time feedback, the ability to quickly optimize. And so from Ford going to Chrysler, basically ran the marketing for Chrysler, Jeep, and Dodge for a few years over there. Was able to in the early 2000s to kind of take that and really kind of hone my understanding of it. You're constantly learning because every day there's something new. So you never, in my my perspective, I don't think you can ever become an expert because there's just something new to learn. So it's kind of the sponge mentality if you want to be in this business. But I think the part that, that I try to take from that strong B2C business is the realization of how you have to put yourself in the consumer's seat and try to deliver to them versus delivering what you need as a company. You have to find that happy medium, of course, but I think that was a beneficial experience for me. From there, was at Walmart for just under a year, SVP of marketing there. The retail world was a slightly different twist on auto retail. So it was, much more fast paced. Every day to day, it was decisions of how people were making the decision in the shopping cart, in the aisle at the end cap, and the tests we would do, and with P&G and some of these really great brands that are expert at understanding what is the emotional connection. From there, had my own business for 5 years, consulting to a myriad of companies, from big banks like Credit Suisse to Whirlpool to Sports Illustrated magazine, to a lot of middle and small size MarTech companies as well. And then to your point, my last, before coming here to ABRA, my last gig was chief storyteller, which is another fun title, over at SAP. So where I was working for the CEO there, Bill McDermott, great guy, wonderful vision, asked me to come in and with the chief storyteller title, help to figure out a way to figure out how to make the software that we sold, 15,000, 75,000 SKUs. I mean, lots and lots of SKUs that are available at any one time, depending on, your role in a company, HR, ops, finance, to make it feel like you were speaking their language as from a customer's perspective, because we were really good at telling you about what the software did, how it worked. We were great at white papers, but if you weren't a techie, if you weren't in IT or if you weren't the CIO, some of that could have felt a little intimidating, and it didn't necessarily help to relate to you in terms of your job needs, how this was going to help. And so that was the job I had, was to try to create ways to make what we did very relatable to every job in the company, and with examples. And we used a lot of our own customers telling their own stories in their words, made it very searchable. So we didn't have to be the ones presenting it to the customer. The customer could find this on their own. So that was, again, a slightly different way to think about creating experience for customers. And that was in a B2B setting, but taking a lot of the B2C principles that existed, which is that personalization, letting people kind of mix and match industry, geography, the job title, the kind of software I was looking for. They could mix and match on their own and kind of figure things out for themselves, and then have an experience with us. So we created a lot of actual physical experiences as well. And it was a really interesting way to try to find the melding of the two. It was towards the last of the 5 years I was there, where this opportunity for ABRA came up. One of my dear friends from back in the auto days early on, she and I had worked together both at Ford and Chrysler. She had been on a board of directors while I was at SAP. I had been on one of her boards as a board of director while I was at SAP. We sold that company, and she was sought after quickly as successful women CEOs who transform startups and sell them successfully are. And so Hellman and Freeman, who is the private equity owner for ABRA Auto Body, reached out and said, "Hey, we'd like you to come and help to take this company to the next level." So she came, and we like to say, you got the band back together. So you kind of pick the best of the best, people who've been there, done that, and brought us all in to do something which I think is extraordinarily exciting, though many people might not understand how sexy and exciting the auto collision business really is, especially compared to these other companies I work for. But it actually is, because it's one of those companies. It was, our CEO's name is Ann Fandozzi, and when we spoke the first time, I said, this is going to be a Harvard business case when we're through with it, because here we are in the year, it was, last year, 2017. And I can't think of another industry as big as ours, and I'll give you little statistics, but we're $40 billion industry in the US, collision, as big as this, that has basically not gone through a consolidation nor a digital transformation, both in terms of operations, but also experience for the customer. It's basically, if you think about when you get in a car accident today, the difference in terms of your experience today versus 20 years ago is that today you've got a cell phone. So you can call your insurance carrier right away. You can call the police to come, and, you get things moving quickly. Whereas you would have 20 years ago, maybe, unless you had a brick phone, had to wait, which I did, but you had to wait to flag somebody down. So other than that, you've got to talk to them, the agent. They've got to recommend some collision shops to you. You choose one, they give you the number, you call that collision shop. You've got to have the adjuster come to your house. You've got to call and make an appointment with him to show up to give you an estimate. Then you got to call and work with the shop. And then, look, it's all extraordinarily manual. It's exactly the same way. And so for me, it was super exciting from an experience and a marketer to see that component and be like, wow, if we could just really map the customer journey and understand that, we could really deliver something special. So that's where we are today. Just to give you a little context, the industry, as I mentioned, is a $40 billion industry just in the US. We at ABRA are, not crazy. Who would think, right? Totally. So we're about $1 billion company. There are 4. They're called MSOs, multi-shop operations.
Well, of course, we have 2 teenage drivers and another one coming. So I'm probably going to be one of your best customers. But.
Well, Jeff, we have shops in Atlanta, so we'll chat after, and I'll help you out. I have sons too, and we've got a Jeep in the shop as we speak. I live in Connecticut. We don't have shops here yet, so I'm living it through the old way. But the shops, we've got, as I said, we were about $1 billion. We've got about 350 shops. There are 4 players sort of our size and ilk. We're the major players, MSOs in the industry. Combined, we have less than 15% of the market. So 85% of the market are like where I am, mom and pop shops. They're single shops. They're like my 2Z, 3Z shops. And what's happening today is, as you know, when you get in a car accident today, it's a much more expensive to replace that bumper than 20 years ago, where it was like a,
yes.
slap.
I know all too well. Thank you. Because our car just got out of the shop last month, actually. So, yeah.
Sensors, cameras, calibration. So you think about these mom and pop shops, and when you think about the cars that are coming, what's required for them to successfully repair the car, you got to have the right diagnostics, the right equipment and tools. You have to write training. Many of the OEMs are requiring certification by them that you have to get to work on cars. So if you're small, and it can be overwhelming. And so we're seeing a great bit of consolidation, as you might expect. They're selling to us in a hurry because they see the opportunity. And, for us, it's great because we get these established businesses. They have relationships. We want to keep their people, because finding good body techs is actually a really hard thing to do. So, and by the way, I'm going to do a little plug for recruiting for that. If you've got a child who is not college, but is like tech, we've got body techs, master body techs who can make up to $200,000 a year. So it's a total fallacy. Oh, I'm telling you, it's a total fallacy. They're in great demand, and it's hard. They're hard to find. So when we buy these shops, as I say, we want to keep the good people so that we can keep the ball rolling. So that's kind of the situation. Our revenue situation is about 90% of our revenue comes from our insurance carriers. So you call your insurance carrier, they say yes, or the other insurance carrier says yes, we'll pay. That's how we are paid as well. And about, I said, 10% are, the cash, the walk-in. It's maybe they don't have insurance or they don't want to call insurance. It's a small enough, price tag, whatever. So if you look at all of that, we are in a B2B2C world. So combining kind of all the best of each of them. So in my world, I'm thinking about insurance carrier as customer primarily, and I'm thinking about you as the car owner as customer, kind of secondary. And it might seem counterintuitive, but the customer owning the car doesn't get the short end of the stick, because unless you have a superior experience your insurance carrier is never going to recommend us again. So actually by us focusing on the insurance carrier and knowing that we're going to have, we have to compete to have the highest customer satisfaction scores, the highest quality, the shortest turnaround time, the lowest cost, by doing all those things, which we're in contract with these carriers for, actually ensures that you as the owner of the car are going to get the best experience. So in terms of those 4 metrics. Now, when it comes to actually the how it gets done, that's sort of the what, we've gone through just a massive journey. So I'm just hitting 18 months here. And since we started, we've jumped fully into this millennium with live chat and intelligent notifications. But even more exciting than that is we're doing some really interesting things with predictive routing and sentiment analysis is where we're going next. And it's been a really interesting journey to be able to map the customer journey in terms of you, the owner, against the journey that we have with our insurance carrier customer and how we can maximize the two of them.
Yeah, so I think I started asking you one question. That was amazing. Well, you cover a lot of ground.
That's what happens when you talk to me.
No, that's good. I think you talk about transforming a company, transforming a brand. So I'm curious about a couple of things because we're seeing this everywhere. Tried and true industries are being disrupted. They're not only being disrupted digitally, but they're being disrupted with how consumers consume. So, for example, Netflix and entertainment, or Amazon across the shopping. And now you have Porsche and Cadillac offering subscription models, so you don't even have to own a car or pay for insurance anymore. You can just have the experience of driving your brand. So as you start and look at all these awesome changes you're making with ABRA, do you envision parts of your business model changing too? I mean, so would you engage with the insurance carriers or the consumers differently maybe than how you're traditionally done it?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, as you look at how the world's evolving, just exactly what you're saying. People like in our industry to talk about the evolution of the driverless car as well. What will that do? Suddenly everybody's safe and, no one's going to need us anymore. I think thankfully for us, it's probably a long ways off before that actually becomes the norm. But on the road to that is a very interesting trajectory in that you think about how companies are thinking differently. So not just the Googles of the world who are creating the driverless cars, but, we saw Toyota doing a partnership and GM has had some investment. So you see the OEMs getting into that too. And to your point, it doesn't seem like a crazy idea that the OEMs might want to, whether it's subscription or you get to the point where it's driverless, you don't have to maybe buy insurance the traditional way anymore. It sort of comes packaged with the car. So whether the OEMs decide to fund that on their own or they partner with certain current insurance carriers, who knows? But I think also insurance carriers, certainly they understand that too. And I think they're looking at how to evolve their offering as well. I can tell you, just in the 18 months I've been here, when I started to meet the insurance carrier, the people that we interact with, and trying to explain kind of my initial vision of what I thought we could do and what we'd want to do to partner with them, and how we thought we could actually make the customer experience so much better, which would in turn give them better metrics, but also a much happier customer. It was met with, I think, some sort of questionable and kind of the squinty eye syndrome. And I can tell you, we have a big conference called NACE in Atlanta. Actually, we were there about a month ago, and maybe 3 weeks ago. But talking to the insurance carriers, it's just like in that year and a half, they are just so gung ho. I mean, some carriers are further ahead than others, as you might expect, but they're all now thinking about what they can do differently to just be in the minds and hearts of consumers in a much different way. They're not, certainly not status quo is not good enough for them. They're all very progressive. So I think kind of on the spectrum of what might change, it's a pretty long spectrum from, the actual insurance offering to simply how do you simplify the experience for the customer, whether it's, photo estimating so you don't have to have the interaction. So how do you get to the point where you can have a completely hands-off experience, literally, maybe even to the point where somebody comes and fixes the car where you're at. I mean, I think we're a long way off from that, but you can imagine how far can you start to create the imagination, and then how do you create the stepwise program there, both in terms of the actual need and then also the offering.
So you had mentioned a little bit ago you're starting to experiment with chatbots, and that drives part of the conversational web. One part I'm curious as to your thoughts on, because last year about 30% of search was initiated voice activated. Mm-hmm. So Alexa, Google Home, Siri. So I can envision a time within just a couple of years where most people will be just searching by talking, right? So if they're in their car or IoT and so as a marketing executive, how does that change your whole perspective? Because the concept of a campaign, right? An offer, an image, a visual, and it's changing because now you're just talking to the consumer, you're talking to the prospect. So what are your thoughts on that?
So one important fact about our industry that I should have included when I was doing the little debrief is that, I'm knocking on wood here for you, people usually only need us once every 7 years. So when you think about the marketing model and how you how you reach customers, it doesn't make sense for us to create, for instance, like a mobile app. If you need us once every 7 years, we're not going to ask you to take real estate on your screen. But when you think of, well, unless you've got a lot of kids, and then that once every 7 years becomes more frequent, right? Maybe then. That's right. So, but we have to think differently about that, and what that means, from again that B2C connection, is exactly what you're talking about. How do we think about like voice activated? So, if you're again, these are not here yet, but these are all part of our imagination set that we're trying to make a reality eventually. But how do you think when you're in an accident and you make a voice call, or you can call your insurance carrier, or let's say you have a GM vehicle and you've got OnStar. What if, someday we could do a partnership with GM and OnStar such that the moment that a collision happens, some sort of impact occurs, your vehicle and OnStar are instantly alerted, right? That's part of the telematics system. The telematics system also gives you a pretty strong indication of what's wrong with the car. I mean, so those things happen right away. If we had a partnership, we're certified, and OnStar was not only on in every vehicle, but the subscription was included, and this service was included, you could imagine that instantly we'd be alerted on the collision side. And because we know from the diagnostics, from the telematics in the vehicle, what's wrong with the car, we might be able to instantly order those parts, send you either a text, an email, or, voice with you on here's the options in terms of slots that are opening time wise. If it's a tow in, we'd immediately send a tow. If it's a drive-in, we'd let you schedule your time. But suddenly we'd take all of those individual steps in your journey, and we consolidate it into one. And so what's the technology that enables all of us to do that, right? Well, again, because it's not a one size fits all, right? It's IVR, it's chatbots, it's the voice search, right? So perhaps you want to ask us for different days or different shops in the area that's something's closer to your work versus your home. Those kinds of things are all part of our, like I say, our imagination set that we're looking to make a reality. I think the other is, barring being able to sort of live in the vehicle with you and sort of being there when you need us, is trying to figure out how we can be closer to you in the places that you're naturally likely to go. So we're with the insurance carrier, okay, but maybe you didn't call your insurance carrier right away, but you immediately posted on Facebook, was it an accident? Anybody have a recommendation? We want to be in those places so that we are looking at different sentiment, different keywords, so that we can actually provide you an offer, make it a seamless experience as quickly as we can, understanding the need. I think also just in process, being able to use that sentiment analysis and not assuming that every time a customer is maybe slightly dissatisfied with how things are going in the repair, that they're going to call and tell us. But they may, share that sentiment online with somebody, or just, versus a tweet. You could tweet, I hate you, you suck, you're not doing it right. short of that, things like where they're maybe just having a conversation, a public conversation on Facebook or some of these sites, like it's why are collision experience, why is my repair process so slow? It allows us to sort of jump in and see what's happening, and can we actually begin to repair some of those relationships before it becomes too late. I was also really intrigued. In fact, we had our private equity firm held an offsite with the CMOs of all the portfolio companies just last week. And we have some really wonderful companies that's part of this portfolio. So Genesis is one, and Kronos, and Genesis in particular does some really interesting things in this field. And we're talking with them about some of that predictive routing and how you can get just really granular, even in a call center situation, beyond, I think, what certainly in the collision business we've begun to imagine or certainly implement. But I think there's a lot of room there to rethink that contact center experience, and there's a lot of evolution happening there. So that's exciting. We had a presentation by the global vice president for product marketing at Facebook, and he was talking to us about how stories in Facebook are probably the most impactful yet least understood device or tool in the Facebook portfolio for marketers. And so you think about, how do you tell a story for a collision? I think I can think of actually a lot of ways, and that it becomes accessible for when you need it. It's there. So I think there's a great bit that is in the sort of the MarTech spectrum that hasn't been touched at all. I like to say that we're kind of the, we're the head of we're the tallest of the short class, if you will, in that I think the whole collision industry has been a bit behind in terms of the customer experience. And so we're using some tried and true technologies to actually improve that. So like I said, intelligent notification and IVR and, some sentiment analysis, but that just kind of catches us up to, I think, where the basics are for every other customer experience people have. So it's now, how do we get to the next level? And I think there's a great deal that we can do there. And I think even more impactful is how we do some of that in conjunction with our insurance carriers to help them to connect with us, to connect with the consumer in those phases as well.
Well, Julie, it's so refreshing talking to you, and it's so easy to see why marketing makes a difference. I mean, the businesses that you've been in, the industries that you've impacted, and now what you're doing at ABRA. Great interview today. Loved your insights. We're going to have to do this again soon to find out how well you're tracking over there. But thank you so much for being on the program today.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it.